It's been a long and bumpy road leading to opening statements in the trial of accused Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. The media has been staked out since January 5th, when the jury selection process first began. Security has been tight in and around the Moakley Federal Courthouse, and more than 8 weeks later, the two sides will finally start to lay out their arguments tomorrow. Out of the more than 1,300 potential jurors called to serve, the judge today seated 18, 10 women and 8 men. WGBH News special correspondent Emily Rooney was in court when the final decisions were made, and she joins me now. Hey, Emily.
Adam.
How you doing?
I'm doing well.
So, did anything stand out about the jurors that were ultimately picked? We know the gender balance. What about, racial balance, that sort of thing?
There is no racial balance. There is one Iranian, partial Iranian, I think. We did a back check on him. Everybody else is white. A vast age range. And I'd say a vast socioeconomic range. There was one guy, very small guy, who's nervously looking at the media the whole time, wearing a hoodie and work construction boots. He got picked. I thought he was going to faint, And the first guy that got picked went, just
really?
put his hands in his But some people you could tell were happy about it. They cracked a little smile and stuff, and then everybody was all serious by the time they got into the box. So you had 64 people sitting in this room, and then they were calling numbers. It was like bingo, and then the person would get up and walk over and take a seat in the jury box.
Every now and then, there's during the voir dire process, there's someone who behaves oddly or says something weird that you remember weeks later. Did anyone like that make the final cut?
That's so interesting you asked that, because all the media was madly checking their notes. First of all, there was 300 and something people actually interviewed, so they're going, juror number 183, was he the one who said this? Was he the one? So I think we'll see some of that analysis in the day. But it was too.
I remember that from the Bulger trial. There was no way. I mean, maybe if someone had a sort of supercomputer brain, but I did not.
And somebody will tomorrow. You'll see some more of that.
How did Tsarnaev
Well, first of all, it was a completely different court configuration today. He sat at the defense desk facing the jurors. So he was sitting with his back to the judge, looking out into the jury pool. So that meant he was facing all of us, too. So we got a very clear picture of him for the very first time. Up until now, his back has been to us, and we could only see him from the side. But there he was, straight on, looking out.
How did he strike you?
He was a tiny bit more engaged today. And when he stood up, after the jury had been seated, when he stood up to leave, you could see he looked over, and for the first time, it seemed to sink in, and this was real, this was really going to happen. He was a little bit more engaged. The attorneys sitting on either side of him were patting him on the back and kind of trying to comfort him through the process. But it was a tedious morning. It was long. It was very quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Usually people are coughing and fidgeting. Nothing.
Let's talk about some of these motions that are still outstanding at this point. The prosecution wants to limit the narrative that the defense can spin around why Dzhokhar Tsarnaev did it. What is the limit that the prosecution wants to place on the tale that the defense can tell?
Well, this is one of the, I don't see how they can argue that. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't see how they can argue that before the fact. If that doesn't fly, it doesn't fly. And the
defense wants to be able to say basically he was pushed into this by a domineering older brother, right?
Exactly. And the jury is either going to buy that or they're not. Why limit it? Is my sense about it. So my guess is that motion will go nowhere. For now, it's been all wins for the prosecution. I doubt sincerely they're going to win on this. And
the prosecution wants that to be admissible, but only later in the trial, right? If in fact he's found guilty, then
tomorrow, what's the problem?
Well, it seems to me, not watching the case as closely as you so far, like if the defense doesn't have that, what else do they have?
They have nothing.
Right?
They have nothing.
All right. Now, what about this question of the boat? The boat that Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was found in, captured in Watertown, and how much of the boat jurors are going to see? I
think the defense wants the entire boat to be presented, either through a jury venue, tour,
like a field trip,
or have large parts of it brought in and reconstructed. And basically, they want to show a state of mind, I think, for Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, but that he had been beaten, bloodied, he had, run for his life, and then laid in that boat. I can't remember how many hours, but he hadn't eaten, had anything to drink. He was in a state of mind, and they want to show that he was in a state of mind when he wrote that note on the side of the boat, and he might have been out of it. So
to the effect of, if you stop doing this to us, stop killing Muslims, and we'll stop too.
He was in his boat that was covered. So he was in a tight quarters, and I think
saw
they want to say that.
From one of the defense attorneys that likened it to a crypt, right? So they want to. I mean, that's what the defense
that's
wants
what they
to
want
do.
to present. That it was that he was like lying in a tomb.
What do you think will happen with that one if you had to wager?
I mean, I think it would be hard and impractical to bring the whole boat in, but I think the jury should get to see the whole boat. Why not? You know?
All right. Now, what about the defense asking for a dismissal of the indictment, saying that the jury selection process was fundamentally flawed?
Well, this is yet
a
fourth attempt at a change of venue, and once again, it's not going to go anywhere. The judge may rule on that even as we speak, so that's not going to go anywhere.
Are they going to keep doing this throughout the trial, by the way?
Can you? I don't know. I don't know.
It seems I keep thinking each one's going to be the last one, and then they do it again.
Yeah, they figure out a new way to do it, but it's the same. It's just basically the essence is that they're looking for a change of venue, and they've come at it these 4 different ways.
All right, tell me about the atmosphere down there today. In the courtroom, you already talked about. What about outside? What's the media presence like?
Yeah, it was much more electric today. There were a lot more, presence of satellite trucks, and actually people were. I thought they were like space saving, but it turns out they had actually gotten permits to park. I was saying, what do you mean we can't park here? It says safe for WBZ. I'm thinking, help me out.
Oh, really? It's allocated to specific media outlets?
It's allocated to specific media. So I think we lost out on that one. But yeah, each spot is marked out. There were many, many more people here. A much bigger national network presence. But
international
I think tomorrow,
too.
International tomorrow will be even more because it's opening statements. What
about the security presence? Is it pretty intense?
Yeah, that has been since January 26th. The day that the trial was supposed to start, it's been essentially the same because since the trial didn't start that day, they already had that plan in place and it was too late to change it. Don't ask me why. So they've had both sides of the streets blocked off. You've got Homeland Security, you've got Boston Police, you've got the Coast Guard.
Any conspicuous weaponry among these guys guarding the courthouse?
You see the dogs. You see a little of it, but it's a lot of standing around.
Sounds like you're inured to it, too, by this point.
A little bit.
Now, the last time I was down there, it looked so different than it did during the Bulger trial. There were all these new buildings going up.
Adam, this is a nightmare. They are building Culver City in front of the courthouse. It's the most gigantic construction site I've ever seen in my life. And here it is. Actually, it's going to be really ugly because it's going to block. The courthouse has some beauty of its own.
It does.
It's going up right. So there's this anthill of a construction thing going on there, and other things like all this kind of work going on. And you saw the Powell brothers was there changing. Life goes on in certain aspects, but they were changing signage and that kind of stuff. But the construction site alone means there's not a single parking place to be had.
Brutal.
It's brutal. The logistics alone.
You're going to be back tomorrow for opening arguments, right? I'm
going to go to opening statements.
Statements, I apologize. Thank you.
Arguments
opening statements.
Is at the end.
Thank you for setting me straight. Now, what's your Twitter handle? I know you're going to be live tweeting, right?
Yeah.
People can follow you.
At Emily Rooney.
At Emily Rooney.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know how much I'm going to be tweeting tomorrow. We'll see. I'll do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in there, but I'm also doing a piece for the news hour, so I'm going to be.
Oh well, that's a good reason to.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. It's tricky because providing that sort of detail can be great, but you really need to almost get in a different frame of mind to do it.
Yeah,
and
I know.
You don't always notice everything.
Garrett Quinn was sitting next to me today. He was tweeting like mad, and I thought I'm just going to read his.
Yeah. All right, Emily Rooney. Thanks. See you tomorrow.